It wasn't nerves that had ruined the opener. What I was overscripted. And I had written down every word of that talk. It was my narrative of what a keynote was supposed to be that was in my way. The ability to read the room and respond to it, the leaving yourself room to be flexible, to meet the moment, that's the thing that allows you to really have presence and hold the room. I deliver the keynote and it was terrible. I mean, when I tell you it was terrible, I mean, it's probably the worst I've ever done on stage in my whole life. All right, welcome back to the Brilliant Balance podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. We're going to talk about how to hold the room, which I think that's a pretty self-explanatory phrase. It's the way I really think about presence, something that women get coached on a lot and maybe given feedback about a lot is, do we have presence? Do we lack presence? Do we know how to wield that presence in a way that elicits the results that we want? And so while mostly I think about holding a room when I am in an engagement as a speaker, because it's really everyone's expecting you to have to hold the room as a speaker, I think that what I'm going to share today realistically applies well beyond that. You know, you might think about times when you are leading an important meeting. You're sort of the person at the head of the table, or when you are presenting in a work setting or elsewhere, and you have to like stand up and deliver something maybe that has slides, maybe that doesn't, but you know, like you kind of are the speaker, even if it's not a speaking event, like you're the presenter. That might be a different frame. Another one I thought about was interviews, when you are the person being interviewed and you want the job. And you have to create an impression and sort of hold the room, the energy of the room in a high stakes moment like that. So what I'm going to share today really should translate into any of those environments, but I'm specifically going to come at this through the frame of speaking, because that's a place where I have a lot of experience. I do a lot of speaking work in this phase of my career. And I think because it is such a terrifying experience for so many people, I mean, I think it's like still the number one fear among adults, at least American adults, is public speaking. Because it's such a fear, I think breaking down some of the maybe lesser known elements of that experience and things that I've observed and learned from my vantage point as a speaker, I think can be helpful in creating some ease in these environments. And in fact, ease is what we really need in order to hold the room. Okay, so let's get into it with a little bit of a story. When I was reflecting on things to share during this episode, I thought back to the first ever live event that I was hosting as part of this business. And I had wanted to do live events for a while. We had done an event for alumni of my coaching program, one of my earlier coaching programs. And that felt a little bit different. It felt a little bit more like a reunion. And I was so delighted to do it. And I think I got enough momentum from that reunion-like event, sort of an insiders event, that I decided to do my first open event where we were going to sell tickets and have people come. This is like, I think circa 2019. And we rented a space and sold the tickets and my team had everything set up. And I remember being very careful about what I was going to wear and was it on brand and, you know, all those things. And I walked out onto the stage and it was in a converted church. The space used to be a church and it had these soaring ceilings and like a big loft where you could host the cocktails afterward or whatever. But it had terrible acoustics because of this. All of the sound just went straight up into this giant ceiling. A lot of wood that was echoey. So none of this is relevant to the story. It's just what I remember about literally the visceral experience of being there that day. So the way we've designed the day, I was going to do an opening keynote, and then we were going to get into more workshop sessions as the day went on. So I take the stage to do this opening keynote, and my team is sort of standing at the edges of the room, and we had like a DJ sound guy, you know, plays this music, and I deliver the keynote, and it was terrible. I mean, when I tell you it was terrible, I mean, it's probably the worst I've ever done on stage in my whole life. And I've been on stage since I was very young. It was awful. And I came off the stage and I knew it was awful. And I walked over to a couple people on my team who were trying to reassure me that like, it was not awful. It was fine. You know, you were maybe a little stiff. It was really fine. But I knew in my bones that it was awful. And I mean, I literally cried. Like I got myself pulled together and I, recovered enough to continue moving through the agenda as planned. And I did, to my credit, like shake it off and keep moving. But it had been so stilted and it was so scripted. And later that day, we found ourselves running a little bit ahead of schedule. And we decided to the team's like, why don't you just do a Q&A? Just go on stage and be like, okay, who has a coaching topic? Who has something that they need coaching on, and just do it. So I was like, okay, fine. I mean, I do sort of impromptu Q&A all the time in group coaching calls. So that is not something that would like scare me at all. So I get up on stage and I have, there's no podium. I'm just at the center of the stage. I don't even think I had a microphone. And I was like, all right, what do we have? What's on your mind? What topics do we want to cover today? And people started asking questions and I came completely alive. I was animated and funny and present, right? And spontaneous. And it was like a whole different person had shown up on that same stage. And by the time I came off the stage, that time my team was not comforting me. I didn't need comforting. Like I felt great and they felt great. And the energy in the room had skyrocketed. And they were looking at me going, do that, more of that, right? Like they knew what it was. They knew it was a superpower. We didn't really necessarily have a name for it at the time. I don't know that I had this insight at the time, or I probably wouldn't have blown the opening keynote so dramatically. Here was the insight. What I eventually figured out was that it wasn't nerves that had ruined the opener. And I think my team was trying to say like, it's okay, you were nervous. It's the first event. I wasn't really nervous. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe I had been nervous before it started. What I was over-scripted. And I had written down every word of that talk. It was my narrative of what a keynote was supposed to be that was in my way. And something about the word keynote put me in this headspace of I should have this scripted. Okay. And so while I didn't read it necessarily, I was very adherent to a pre-scripted delivery, right? I was trying to deliver this predefined piece of content when my whole skill set is in creating on the fly. It's really why podcasting works for me, because my whole skill set is in, I got to create this experience out of thin air. And that is 50 times better when it is a two-way engagement, right? When I am live in the room with people in front of me, the script that I so carefully created did not feel like protection. It felt like a cage. It felt like, I want to say this thing that's about to come out of my mouth and I can't say it because I have to stay on point or I'm going to lose myself in this delivery. And that fear of losing myself in the delivery and not getting across what I wanted to get across or not saying it the exact way I'd written it down, that was what created an absolutely terrible talk. And the benefit, what I learned by doing that Q&A, which was improvisational by design, was that is the answer to everything, right? The ability to read the room and respond to it, the leaving yourself room to be flexible, to meet the moment, that's the thing that allows you to really have presence and hold the room. When you are trying to deliver something that you decided in advance what you were going to say, people can smell that, right? Not just in public speaking, like, not just if you're delivering the equivalent of a keynote, but really any time that you have the floor. If you are delivering something that sounds like, let me just pull these notes out of my pocket. That's why I always struggle with award shows. You know how when somebody gets up to do an award, like they win an award, they know they're nominated for this award. They have been told there is a 1 in 4 chance or a 1 in 6 chance you're going to win this award. And they get up there and then they have this very scripted response that they're like pulling out of their pocket to read. That drives me nuts because the people who deliver spontaneously in that moment from the heart and let it sort of pour out of them, aren't those always the better acceptance speeches? I mean, look, yes, write down the names of people you want to make sure you're not going to forget. Have a dot to dot that helps you kind of keep it into the amount of time you've been allotted. But having the entire thing written down is really going to start to feel more constricting than you want it to. Okay. So I have given hundreds of keynotes at this point. I try not to call them keynotes now as often as possible just to avoid the kind of shackles of that, right? But I have been on stage hundreds of times. And I want to take you inside what I actually have learned from standing at the front of the room. This is really not the stuff that you're going to hear in like a presentation skills class. This is like my real world lived experience, right? What am I seeing? What have I learned? What have I trained myself to stop doing? And really what I think people are less likely to tell you before you walk into your own high stakes moment. So whether you're walking on stage or you are showing up in any room that matters, I think these teaching points will hopefully be valuable. Okay. So the first thing that I think is critically important, very first thing is speaking is a two-way conversation. Yes, even if you are on stage as a keynote and if people are not speaking back with their mouths, they are speaking back with their eyes. They are speaking back with their body language. They are speaking back with their attention. And sometimes if you do it right, you can even get them to respond back, audibly. So the audience is not passive. The audience is not invisible. You are in a conversation with them. And so, by the way, you can listen to me today also through the lens of an audience member, because being a good audience member is critically important, and you are in the conversation whether you know it or not. Okay. So body language is participation. If the people in the audience are nodding, right? If they're smiling, if they're leaning in, if you're seeing them, you land a key point and then they write it down. They pull out a camera and they take a picture of your slide. Those are all sort of moments of engagement. All of it registers. Okay. So does multitasking. So does disengagement. If someone is multitasking, they're doing work, they're on their phone, but not at a key moment, that speaker, the person at the front of the room, knows exactly what's happening. So you get more from the speaker when you give them more. That energy is like reciprocal. Okay. The next meeting you're in, notice, pay attention to what you're giving as a participant. Are you making eye contact? Are you giving them that nonverbal encouragement to keep going? Right? Are you engaged enough to take a note here and there at a key moment? That will pull the very best out of the person who's speaking. And if you are the speaker, if you have the floor, you're looking for that because it's evidence. It's kind of like real-time feedback on how's it going. If you look around a room and everyone is checked out, you have one job, and that is get their attention because you've lost it. And so how are you going to get their attention back? You can ask a question. You can start doing a show of hands, anything that's going to drive engagement back from that group. Because if you lose them, they cannot hear the message that you are there to deliver. Okay. So notice what you're giving as an audience member, and what you bring to that room really changes what's possible within it. So when you walk on stage as a speaker or you come to the front of the room to present, just know that you are in a two-way dialogue, even if they are not saying a word. Okay. I started to get into the second point already, which is there are things that I can see from the stage that you don't know I can see, or you think I can't see, right? The number one biggest culprit here is engagement. It is the multitasking. It is the person who is really, they're there, but they're not there. The second one is like the actively disgruntled person, right? Some of us know that we have to kind of mind our face, and the facial expression that you are giving the speaker, if you are giving a quizzical glance of like, I don't think I agree with you, or you're eye rolling, or you're whatever you're doing that is saying, I think this is bunk, right? That's visible. And so speakers will fall over themselves, untrained speakers, less experienced speakers. And I would say I'm still trying to unlearn this habit, will fall all over themselves trying to win you over. And that's really not the speaker's job. The speaker's job is not try to win over every single person in the audience. Also, we will do absolutely anything for the person who's genuinely there. If you are the one giving me the head nods, the encouragement, you're writing stuff down, and you come up to me afterwards, and you could probably ask me for my firstborn child, and I would be like, yep, you can have her, because it matters so much when someone is giving you just a little bit of something back. Right? It is a lot to carry that room and the energy of that room. And when someone is feeding you little bits of energy from their seat in the audience, that really matters. Okay. So if you are looking to build rapport with the person who's on stage, that ability to give them a little bit of something is a game changer. The room tells you everything very early on. I think most speakers haven't necessarily trained themselves to listen, to really pay attention to what am I getting from the nonverbals in the room. There was a point, I don't know how many years ago, a few years ago, when people really started taking pictures of slides. I think it's when, we hit a tipping point, cameras were just ubiquitous. And rather than writing something down, people are much more likely to just grab their camera and take a picture of a slide. So you can bet that if you watch a bunch of cameras come out, you've just hit a key moment in your talk, right? If people care about this enough that they want to capture it, that's like a mic drop moment in your talk. And if it's not on your slide and it comes out of your mouth and you watch everybody's pens come out or pencils come out, that is a mic drop moment. You know it when you've said it, right? Because they're like, oh, I don't want to lose that. I'm going to jot down something about that. So as you're developing content and you want to hold the room, you're like, oh, that mattered. How do I echo back to that point? How do I circle back to that moment? Because I know I watched it land. And so I want to make sure we're giving it lots of airtime. Okay. So here's a translation point for you. If you think about this two-way dialogue coupled with what they can see from the stage, being a good audience member really matters. It will help you get more out of that speaker. And you have to be mindful of that when you finally get the stage. You don't want to be thrown off by the fact that you can see all of that stuff that you never knew was visible. You have to be prepared. Someone will be behind on a presentation they were supposed to do or a document they were supposed to create, and they feel like they have to multitask during your time, during your meeting. They're getting a critical email from somebody. So as a speaker, the ability to go, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and trust that this has nothing to do with me. But I'm also going to remove my attention from that person because they can feel like a giant blinking red light, like vying for your attention. You'll want to win them over. If you can just learn to sort of tune them out and move back to all the people who are neutral to positive in their engagement, it is much easier to hold the room because you're not distracted by trying to win someone over. Okay. Third teaching point I would give you is connect before you teach. Or connect before you present, connect before you inform, right? The question to really ask before you open your mouth is not what do I need to say? It's what does this room need from me? In order to establish a level of connection with me, what do the people in this room need from me in order for that like tether to get cast, right? How am I going to pull a thread from me to there? Do you need to credential yourself because it is a highly distinguished audience and they might doubt, why should I listen to this person? Or do I need to like use warmth to create connection? Like, do I need to drop a little bit of humor here? Do I need to do something that's a little bit self-deprecating? So most of us are like trained that what we need is credentialing. We need our bio to come in before us and say where we went to school and all the things about us. And that is supposed to set up like, you should listen to this person. And then we want to come in and like hit it hard with a teaching point. And I don't think that's what works. I think what works the best is a human to human moment where something kind of breaks the wall between the speaker and the audience. And I don't care if this is the director of a department who is going to give a presentation to all of their direct reports and those direct reports, like if it's their whole organization, or if it is a keynote speaker who's been hired to come into a conference. Rapport, connection before content. Anything that you can do to be like, look at us, we are the same, right? There is something that we have in common. So and I'll tell you another like really just secret weapon here is if you can get the person who is introducing you to do some of that work for you, amazing. So this works the best in like you've been hired to do a keynote, right? You've been brought in, invited to speak at a place that you're not normally a part of that group. If instead of reading your bio, they will just talk from the heart about why they asked you to come, why they picked you, why they brought you in. It can be, I read her book. It can be, my sister was an avid listener of her podcast. Like in my case, people will often say, when I heard Cheryl Ann speak at this other place, this particular thing that she said stuck with me so much that when I had the opportunity to bring a speaker here, I knew who I wanted. Or I've been listening to her podcast for 9 years. I think I was like OG podcast listener. And I often find myself quoting episodes, like my kids know her voice. I wanted to bring her because of her insights on X, Y, and Z. So you get that they are really creating a connection between you. Or, hey, we were sorority sisters, or we worked together at Procter & Gamble. Like there's ways that people bring a very warm personal spin to that introduction. I personally find those much more powerful than somebody reading my scripted bio, right? So you can think about that in a job interview, in a sales conversation, in your first meeting with a new team. Connection before credentialing, almost always the right order, right? We feel like we need the credentialing. We need to tell people about our talents and our experience, but actually the connection is going to transcend that almost every time. They will care more about the rest of it. The next thing I would want to say about how to hold the room is what is the mistake that I made in my opening story, which is over scripting is a trap. Your best version, the best version of you is not the most scripted. I know it feels like it is because it feels like a safety net that you can hold on to, right? It's like, okay, I know what I'm going to say and I'm going to say them in exactly these words. And I think for me, that comes from being like, I'm a decent writer, right? And so if I'm going to write down exactly what I'm going to say, you will know it if I'm reading it because everything about my voice sounds different. But if I have the dot to dot of what I want to say, if I've got my main points figured out and I let the words fill in organically, you feel that. You feel that's how we speak to each other. So when a speaker gets up and they're like, a reader, I am reading this exact thing that I wrote to you. You got to be a really gifted speaker to pull that off and have it sound like it's not scripted. Okay. And some people can do it. But I mean, I think actors do it every day. That's what they're doing, right? They're reading lines that are pre-written, but they are delivering them as though they just had that idea. That is a skill, a very different skill. But if you are somebody who is there because you are credible on this subject and you have your own ideas, right? Then lay down the narrative that it is supposed to be scripted and just get clear about what you need to get across. This is what I need to get this point across, and then this point across, and then this point across. And the order that my words come out and the way that I do that can then be a little bit more organic, right? It can be responsive to what is happening in the room. You can read the energy in the room. You can hearken back to a moment that happened before you even went on stage that you happened to observe. You can't do that if you're scripted. So that ability to hold the room is like you're present. And you're demonstrating your presence because you're responsive to what is actually happening in the room. So know your content cold, right? Know your subject matter. Know it inside out, backwards, and upside down, because then you can deliver it in any way. But if you need to follow an exact script to get your point across, you probably don't know it well enough yet. You want to hold the delivery kind of loosely. Okay. And then I would say, the last point I really want to get into in detail today is that preparation is really about your head, not your words. So getting your head in the game, doing whatever you have to do to quell your nerves and not be spinning out about I'm super nervous and I don't know how to like land in this room and my nervous system is kind of super activated. The unfamiliarity of the environment and the unfamiliarity of the people are what's activating often, right? So if you are in a job interview and you've never met this person before, the unfamiliarity with that person or with their office or wherever you're having the interview is like a big part of the battle, right? If I'm going in to speak and a client has hired me and I've never been in that space before and I've never laid eyes on those people before except the individual who hired me, that's an unfamiliar environment. And my body knows that. So I have to do some things to calm my body down so that my head can do what its job, okay? Pro tip is just like arrive early. Do not slide in 5 minutes before you have to go on stage. If you can be in the room, sometimes if I'm speaking in another city, I will go to the space the night before and just kind of feel the room. Just, okay, that's the conference room we're in. Let me feel what this feels like at this hotel, right? Or if I can't do that, I'm going to arrive early enough that I can be in the room. Stand at the front of the room. See what it looks like and feels like from the space you're going to be. Sit in a seat. right? See what it looks, how the stage looks or how the area you're going to be presenting from looks to them. Can you see the slides where they're going to be? Is there any kind of a block? Is there like a huge glare from a window behind you? You're going to feel those things if you're in the room. Also, arriving early lets you build some rapport with a handful of people before it starts. Like you can talk to some people. All right, buy the coffee, buy the whatever. Like just a few people have said hello to you, good morning, good afternoon, before you get on that stage, which means guess who the people are that are going to be extra engaged when this whole thing kicks off, right? And then if you can not hide behind like a podium, but get yourself where there's not a barrier between you and the audience, that is really a shortcut to connection. So anything that you can do to stand, move, take up space, and kind of eliminate a physical barrier between you and your audience, the better. Now, many people, especially women, want that barrier because it's a crutch. I've been there, right? It's a place to hide. We're like, I don't want people looking at me. I'm just going to stand here and hide behind this thing. You lose a lot of power. You lose a lot of presence and a lot of power by doing that. So I'm gonna get into this a little further in my Sunday Substack about some really significant behind the scenes things I've learned on how to be like physically comfortable when you're in one of these high stakes days that will make it easier for you to hold that space and hold that power. But just trust me on this one, you do not want to hide behind something. Okay. So if it's a big high stakes event, get there early. Be in the space, walk the space, talk to some people before it starts. That familiarity like reduces the cognitive load so you have more left over for what actually matters. If your brain is so busy trying to process, this is new and different, like recalculating, it's going to take you right out of your game. And you want all of your headspace organized around the thing you're there to say. Okay. So those are pro tips from, how are you going to hold the room? You're going to get there early so you know what it feels like and you're not fighting the fact that it's unfamiliar. You are going to do some things to build rapport in early on. You're going to do it before you even get on stage, and you're going to do it hopefully through the person introducing you, and you're going to do it when you actually take the stage, right? Connect before you talk, before you teach. You are not going to overscript yourself. You are going to trust that you know your material and you will find your words. So you are just going to give yourself like the dot to dot version of what you hope to say and deliver so that you have a prayer of sounding conversational, because it is much easier to listen to someone who's conversational. And you're going to remember that that is in fact a two-way conversation. The people in the room are giving you something back. They're giving you nonverbals. They will respond if you ask them questions, and you can get something back, something going with that audience if you're really able to hold the room. So collectively, I think, learn from my mistake, the really big faux pas at that first event that I did where I hadn't pieced all this together yet. And I kind of did every single thing wrong. We kept me like backstage until it was time for the keynote. I did not walk the room and talk to people. I mean, I literally, as I think about it, I think I broke every single one of these rules. We did a very credentialed introduction of me before I came out that felt kind of formal. I stood behind a podium. I delivered prepared remarks, and the whole thing was flat as a pancake. And contrast that with how it felt when I did the Q&A, in which I just came totally alive and the room came alive right with me. That's what we're looking for. That's how you hold a room. Okay. So I want you to take that out into the world in whatever way you have high stakes days in front of people. Again, it could be an interview, it could be a presentation, it could be a big meeting, but a place where you allow the script to disappear, right? You're not overly prepared. You just have you, the room, the people in it, and you trust yourself enough to really be in the conversation instead of performing it. That's what I want for you. And then if you want to get deeper into the practical side of this, like the what to wear, what to do with the clip-on mic, what outfit choices are terrible if you're going to have a clip-on mic, right? What do you do about your hair? What do you eat? All that stuff. I'm going to get into that in Sunday's Substack post. Pro tips for high stakes moments. Okay. All right. So thank you for joining me today. It was really, this is a nice little bit of a different angle on our normal stuff. And of course, if you are hosting an event where you need a speaker and you're interested in having me join you for that event, I hope you'll consider that. The link for our speaker page is in the show notes. I'll just put it there. Makes it easy. There's a little reel that you can watch of an event that I did. You can kind of get all the details on how to get on the calendar and have a discussion about a potential event where we could collaborate. I would love to be with you, your company, your organization, your whatever you are a part of, where you bring someone in to speak or host a workshop, or host like a fireside chat. I love that format. Different than keynotes. Sometimes people think like, well, we don't have a big event. I love to do a coaching roundtable with groups. And I really love like a moderated chat where maybe like I'm sitting in a chair and someone is sitting in a chair and they're interviewing me. We're kind of having a conversation in front of the audience. That is a great format because we really can respond to what are the questions from the audience and then pull them into the conversation as well. So if any of that is on the radar for an organization you're affiliated with, let's talk about it. I would love to be a part of it. And thanks for tuning in today. Till next time, let's be brilliant.